Hi, I'm Ryan, and in this video today I'm going to do a walkthrough of my Pro Tools session for Always Standing By. This is a song I wrote and produced. I was inspired to write and produce it when my wife and I came into a new community and new relationships with this church. We began going to in Quarryville, Pennsylvania, called Encounter. These folks were performing in worship one morning. Julius Brown, Kirsten Kahn, Travis Mast was leading and playing guitar, and I just leaned over to my wife and I said, "I'm going to have songs for these guys." And so this was the first experiment, if you will, writing and producing and working with these guys, and it was a very rewarding experience for me. So the song is out. You can listen to it on all platforms, and I'll have a link in here for the YouTube page. But this is a Pro Tools walkthrough of Always Standing By. We thank the Creator for our time today. Let's check it out. All right, so here it is. My Pro Tools projects tend to go just deeper and deeper in levels of production and in my ideas and the way that I execute them. So I don't think every Pro Tools project looks the same one to the next. I think they each kind of have their own life and the way that they develop. I have over the years created multiple templates and styles of working through things. And then just as I got into a specific set of tracks that I was trying to work through, I just ignored templates more and more. So my sessions literally always start off with just a couple tracks of instruments as I start to build them out. And I really just kind of build them organically by adding the track that I know that I need next, or the effect that I know I need next. And so I have a couple templates for groups of tracks, but other than that, most of what you see here was built track by track, one at a time, as I work through things. I have this very kind of long, patient, drawn-out process when I'm producing a song. The process of this one took about 8 months, I think, from start to completion. And it was really a walk for me because I'm not used to producing things with other people. And so for me, I really began working on this song and writing it out and working on the track, and then really getting to a point where I wanted to be able to bring Julius and Kirsten in as vocalists on this, and what it was going to take to do that. So I was writing the lines and working out the melody of the verses, and then kind of simultaneously building out 3 verses symmetrically. In a way that, and there's a beautiful symmetry to the songwriting in this that I really enjoy just the process of. But I've never done a song like this where I basically was writing 3 verses side by side, this line, this line, this line, and then this line, this line, this line. A very unique and different approach for me to walk through it that way. And so the song just eventually kind of developed and grew from verse 1 to verse 2. Things heighten a little bit. Verse 3, they pick up more. There's a bridge, it picks up more. There's the end, the final choruses, it picks up even more. So things are always much thinner for me at the start than they are at the end, when everything is really filled in. And so I tend to organize a session from left to right with the parts that start first and then kind of work their way down and cascade them in this kind of way. But it all happens very organically, and it takes a long period of time to work through that. And so it's building out the Pro Tools session and composing the parts, working with the people, because I'd never worked with them on anything before and really didn't know them well before I started pulling them into recording, vocal sessions and kind of coaching them through things. So we had very good, elaborate conversations, and it was a fun process all the way through. So Always Standing By is essentially covers 3 stories in the Bible about people who were ordinary people who are brought up into extraordinary circumstances, really to save the nation of Israel. And it started for me with Moses. I'm always fascinated by the story of Moses. Here's a guy who was called to lead hundreds of thousands of people, and he had a speech impediment of some kind, right? And so that's always fascinated me, um, uh, a lot, I think. And I could go back and read that story all the time. With verse 2, when Julius comes in singing, it is the story of Gideon and how God just kind of sarcastically calls out Gideon as being this mighty man of valor who's hiding from, from raiders and from people who are looking to take, their food and really break them up as a group. And just the story of Gideon and how God uses, 300 men with light and sound, essentially to drive away an entire army, which is just an awesome story. And then for Kirsten specifically, I went with the story of Esther. And Esther's story is incredible. An orphan, an orphan woman who essentially finds herself at the top of the Persian Empire is just awesome, and just the way that God covered her there in those circumstances. So 3 really neat stories put together in a symmetrical way to put this song together, and I built it out the Pro Tools session just similar to that. So everything that's in orange for me here is a folder track, and I think the thing that I'll say about folder tracks is I don't like routing folders because I don't like the subgroup being at the left of all of the tracks. That's always bothered me to some extent. And I wish Avid would just make a preference to orient the subgroup track to the left or the right of the tracks. It would just make this a lot easier. But so what I tend to do is I organize all of the tracks into basic folders, and then everything in yellow is going to a larger main subgroup towards the mix that's down here. So down here at the bottom of the session, I have all of my intro tracks, all of the drums, all of the music, all of the vocals here. And so everything in yellow is essentially feeding one of those main subgroups at the bottom. So what I do for all of the drums is I put them in a folder, and the subgroup aux is outside of the folder here. And, so the folder, the subgroup aux, I didn't do that for a couple of these here. And then I have the guitars, here's the subgroup for those, and so on. These tracks that are purple are just kind of left out on their own, going to the subs, on their own anyway. And I didn't do folders for everything, so there's still a couple other subgroups in here. But that gives you just kind of the idea of the layout, that I work through as I'm putting this together. With the markers, I'm trying usually to, in some way, color code similar sections of the songs. And I think with this song in particular, I got away from that and just didn't pay attention as much to the marker colors. And it just worked out okay, fine. But normally I would have verse 1, verse 2, and verse 3, would be the same color. And maybe I'll just do that now. But I don't have my, let's see, I don't have my color palette open here. So if I look at verse 3 here, and I'm using that purple, maybe I'll just do that with verse 1 and verse 2 here as well. So this just looks like I'm practicing some sense with my marker colors and organization. But that's usually something that I try to work out there. So I think what I'll do is let's just take a look at our first folder here. I'm actually going to option click here and just open all of the folders and just give you kind of a sense of the scope of the project from top to bottom here. The acoustic drum kit is here. Essentially all the digital drum programming is here. Multiple bass tracks here for the different sections. Then we get to our instruments, and so these are my intro instruments at the beginning of the song and those layers. I have 2 sections of guitar work that's in here for the bridge and the final choruses that are put together here. We have the main instruments in here. Main instruments are just the things that tend to last for periods of time or sections. However, it makes sense to me to organize that. So I have my main instruments here, and then a group of instruments that come in for a particular part of a verse, a group of instruments that come in for the bridge section there with the guitars. If I scroll down here further, I can go ahead and close these for now. we get into the orchestra parts here. I just did violins and some brass and horn parts in here. These are not very articulate. They're really just backdrop, just building blocks essentially. And it feels like a big production because all of those little individual elements are there. But they're not really showing off a whole lot, and they're really just reinforcing energy behind the melody for the most part. But they are noticeable in some spots, but they're not on top of everything. They really are kind of in the background more. And then towards the bottom, these are effects tracks. So these are sound effects that I put in and work out to transition through sections of a verse. And I'll play through a couple of these things a little bit. Then I have the vocals in here. So here is a couple of my vocal tracks in here, just my starting verse 1, Julius's verse 1, and then his harmony with Kirsten when Kirsten comes in for verse 3, and then Julius's bridge part in here. And then Kirsten's at the end down here, a couple of parts and doubles in between. We did a lot of vocal overdubbing to put together a choir here at the end of the song. And so I am singing a group of vocals for bass vocals and a group of tenor vocals, although I'm not nearly as great in that range as Julius is. So he and I are kind of layered together there. Kirsten is doing alto parts, and Brooke Twaddell came in to do backup alto parts and then soprano parts in here. This is like gospel choir in a box. This is a really fun group of people here, just like the five of us. Really good at stacking vocal parts there as well. So we had some fun doing that. A lot of editing on my part. No small amount of tuning, honestly, on my own vocals and things just to get the layering to sit in there right. There was a period of time with the choir where at the end here we do a key change. And I decided when we did the key change, I would break the instruments out and just do one a cappella line here with this like 4 or 5 part harmony that's happening here. And I kind of decided that late in the game. I decided to change the chord progression there for like 2 bars after I recorded everyone else. So I recorded everyone doing the key change, and then I said, well, that first chord on that key change needs to be different. And I retuned all of the vocals, like 30 tracks of vocals, into the right notes for that breakout. And there's just enough of them there that you don't really notice it. And so that was quite an experience, but I probably spent days just editing and tuning vocal parts just to work through the changes that I decided after I did the recording of all of those parts. So towards the bottom here, we just have the final subgroups, a couple VCAs in here. Everything is going through the mix track and coming out the master here. And this is live. I need to render everything out. I have not done so because I thought I would do a walkthrough like this. And Avid released the June release this year of 24.6, and I opened this session in that version, and the delay compensation was all messed up in this session. The drums were out of time with the instruments and the vocals, and you can see the number of tracks in here and just all of the routing and the busing and effects and subgroups and things that are in here, everything that's involved. I spent hours trying to figure it out. I could not figure it out. And it wasn't like an M1 versus Rosetta kind of thing. I couldn't figure out exactly what was causing it, or a plugin or whatever. Couldn't figure it out. And I uninstalled version 6 and reinstalled version 3, and everything was fine. So Avid, I don't know what you did, but I'm just going to sit tight for a little while until maybe just give you, I haven't had an Avid release give me trouble like that on anything in a long time. So that was a major fail for me. So I just came back to this, and I decided I need to do a walkthrough now because my next step is just to render everything out, right? Most of it is rendered out. You can see over here in the track list, there are a lot of inactive tracks in here. So a lot of things do get rendered as I'm working through the processing of them, working along the way there. But, Still some work to do there just to finalize everything, but I better do it because I'm not going to get it back if I update my Pro Tools version again. All right, so let me start at the top of this session, and I'll just talk about my work with SSD. I use SSD5 for acoustic drums. I have a couple of the libraries in there. I usually take a good amount of time to kind of piece together an SSD kit in the way that I want and work through the mixer to reroute the mixer outputs all to individual SSD buses. And I did that. And then one day I opened the session without my external library drive being connected. I was on my laptop. And the SSD plugin just dropped any connection to anything, and everything was gone. Even when I reconnected it, it wouldn't see, like the library chain or whatever was just gone. And so I learned not to do that again, and I installed SSD on my laptop directly just to make sure that that library was always there. So then I rebuilt the kit again, worked through everything, took my time, printed everything down, and then like a month later at some point was opening something and it dropped again. So I could open the sampler and show you the sampler, but there's nothing in it. And that's a hard lesson to figure out with SSD. So if something is not available when you open that plugin, it loses everything. And I did assign, I think, a preset with that. I just haven't recalled that preset, but after the first time, I saved a preset and made sure that didn't happen to me again. This is what it looks like for me to work through drum material. I am not a keyboard drummer, so for me, it's not about tapping out like the groove and then refining things. I am penciling in every drum hit in here when I'm working through the acoustic drum programming of a session. So it's me penciling in individual MIDI notes in here. It's not me playing drums or anything. I wish I could play drums, but I can't. But this is my sauce. You know, this is how I work through it. I really like the Pro Tools features for Velocity. I use a lot of the really specific features in here. And if I just show the Velocity view in here for now, I do a lot usually to randomize drum hits going through, kick snares, toms. There's a lot of hi-hat randomization in here in Velocities. And in SSD, you can do this because there is essentially a tight hat, a quarter open hat, a half open, full open. So you can really, for me, get like a really nice motion happening in the hi-hat programming going through a session. Bring the ride cymbals in and so on. So I actually really like the production sample content in the kits on SSD5, and it gives me enough to work through with that. So I work out the grooves. I randomize a lot of the hi-hat programming, especially. These high velocities in here are usually mostly kick drums. The snares, I kind of alternate between, the double snare hits and the flams and stuff that are in there within the library. And so this is me down the line here, just working out some different randomization in the velocities. So in Pro Tools, for example, I might say, I want to start with a particular number, and then I want to randomize it, but I want it to, and then I'll usually do something else in here, like I will, maybe I'm doing some scaling here, and actually, no, I'm not doing scaling. So I'll just start with a particular number, and then I'll randomize it, and then I'll just adjust these two values from the start. I use every feature in here, so I'm just thinking in order. But I'll start with a particular velocity number, and I'll have the hi-hats, for example, in there, and then I will randomize the velocities, and then I'll say, okay, this needs to drop down. This is like 82 now, less randomization, more randomization, whatever. And that's where you come up with just kind of like hard floors right here and hard ceilings. That's not all the way up, for example, just because I'm kind of finding a niche where things can exist in and work out that way. I really like doing velocity ramps in Pro Tools because you can make really nice, easy glides in the parts like this. So if I just solo my acoustic drums here, let's see, I actually printed all of this down to this track. So if I just solo out like the drum, this kind of ramp and the snare. Okay, so just being able to really finesse ramps like this in here. So I would select all of these, for example, and then we can do like a change smoothly from one value to the next, and you can apply a curve, and then you can put, you know, the floor and the ceiling on the ramps and things like that. So at some point I had a limit in here, probably that was whatever this is at. This one, give me that one right there. That's at 23. So at some point I did a ramp from 23 to 127. And the other thing you can do in here, which I didn't do in this example, but just to make the point, is you can set those things and then you can even randomize it. So if I put like 25 in here, 25 to 120, for example, so I'll put that change smoothly, 25 to 120 in here with a little bit of a curve. So I don't actually need the limit here. And then I just randomize it and apply that. You get a general curve, right, that goes up, but everything is not like so robotic in the way that you do that. And I do this a lot with cymbal rolls. So I have probably a cymbal roll in here somewhere that I could show you. But just the ability to toggle these velocity functions in here, I spend a lot of time in quantized velocity and duration, working through very specific sections very quickly in exactly what I want to do. So I'm just showing that to say, don't sleep on Pro Tools MIDI production. It's awesome. And it's actually much quicker and easier to get very advanced, very specific advanced things happening to me than in Logic. And I've tried to spend a lot of time in Logic to work through presets and settings, humanizing, getting the humanizing right in there. And I just have, you know, challenges and just want to come back to this because it's so simple. So, and then just the little details with SSD and like the velocity work that I have at the end here. So I'll just play the outro of this. Just some kind of deft work in the rides here. Okay. Really nice velocity layers in SSD there to just make that as real as possible. But I just really like the way that comes together. So everything that we're hearing is not just coming out of SSD, right? It's after all of the processing that I did to these drums. So I usually will lay the drums down and I will have the EQs and low latency plugins in here because I'm still tracking vocals. I'm trying not to build up a lot of latency in here. So at that stage, I usually don't have limiters. In here, there's the transient plugins. I think that's from Native. And then Radiator from Soundtoys. Some of these are delay, latency kind of plugins. The limiters are, I'll take those off or I'll deactivate them for the time being. You know, while we're doing vocal tracking, and then I'll come back and put them back on. So because I'm not sold on everything until we're towards the end and I'm ready to print everything down. So it's always a little bit of a chore to not commit the drums until I'm absolutely ready and to go back through and deactivate plugins and activate them back, you know, when I'm ready to use them. I'm using the UBK1. I'm not going to show all of these tracks here, but for example, I'll just pull up one of these. So the UBK1, I'm adding just some saturation to the kick here with some mild soft compression. This isn't the harder compression algorithm in here, but just a little bit of, that is not the aggressive one. So it's just somewhere in the middle. So there's a lighter attack on that one and just adding some saturation to drive that kick a little bit there. And but I'm using the UBK on a couple of these. I'm using the Radiator down here on the toms. And so that's just a look at, you know, some of my processing there. I'm usually using the expanders. The expanders also create delay. I have them in there for my channel strip setting for some of my drum tracks. And then I just kind of decide whether to use them or not. When it came to the toms, I probably had the expander in here, but I took it out and experimented with a couple other things that I wanted to do instead. And, and it just worked out in the end. So all of my drums here, I'll just talk about my routing here. All of my drums are going to the SSD subgroup, except for the hi-hat and the overheads and the room mics. So I am sending everything to the subgroup inputs here, except for the cymbals, because I don't want the cymbals to be affected by compression. And so this is the dry drums group here with no processing. And it is also coming into this track here with an 1176 compression on it. And I guess I'll just open this up for a moment and just show you what this looks like. The MC77 is actually a pretty good 1176 model for me. It's pretty soft. I think that's what I like about it. It's pretty soft and musical. It's not very like overly aggressive and snappy. And a lot of 1176 models across the board tend to be pretty snappy and aggressive, and this one just has a softer kind of feel to it for me, so I tend to like this one. But I'm doing really fast compression here. No attacks are slipping through, right? Pretty high compression and ratio here. Fast releases, so I'm just controlling the peaks on this one. And then on this one, I did a radiator setting, and I'll just show that. What are we doing with the radiator here? Just opening up some highs here on the treble. So just a different kind of saturation, clean saturation. So it's clean, line level, so no noise, just boosting some high frequencies in there and driving that a little bit. Two different flavors of compression, saturation here, and the dry is how those tracks are working together. All right, so that's a look at the acoustic drum mix and what's happening there. All of these sends here are going to, I actually have a couple reverbs set up over here. I don't remember which ones I ended up using, but here is a pre subgroup reverb, for example. So I have a pre subgroup reverb and a post reverb that's over here. And the pre-reverb is a little bit dialed in for the actual, for the compression to take part in, and then some post-reverb happening in here. I have a send here going to a parallel snare that's right here. So this is going to be a pre-fader send of the snare that is getting compressed really hard, also through the MC77, and gated there with some EQ. And so this is just another snare track. This is part of the subgroup as well, but for all intents and purposes, this is a functioning track all on its own, because I'm usually using a pre-fader send for that as well. Okay. Okay. It's kind of obnoxious detail, but it comes together. And I was looking for so this was the original subgroup that everything was going to. And on here, I have a couple different limiters. One of the things, certainly when I'm working through tracking, is I take the limiters off and then I come back and decide what I'm going to use. And I think I ended up using the Pro L2 on this one specifically. And I don't think I'm doing much there. I'm just driving the peaks just a little bit, a couple dB, and that's all I'm really doing through the Pro L2. But the Pro L2 is a pretty way to look at it. And so I appreciate that plugin, maybe just a little bit more than the others. And the algorithm is transient friendly in the way that I'm using that one. So that's a look at the total. If I make this active here, here's the Pro L2. So I'm just using the modern algorithm, a little bit of look ahead, but all I'm really doing is just driving the gain peaks up a little bit here. So just adding 4 dB of gain into where the mix was, and that's it, okay? And then just mixing from that point forward. So we can actually see the printout of the drums here. They are obviously limited pretty well, although the energy, it kind of varies slightly still based on some of those velocities in there. And that's it. That's our drum print there. I'll move down to the program drums, just talk about a couple things here. I have talked in a previous video about instrument tracks and how to use instrument tracks for automation of things. And so I'll solo this out. So for example, here is a snare track and this nonlinear reverb that's taking part in that. All right, and then it becomes dry. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a clip essentially to move, send mutes or just track mutes around. And so if I move this clip and I say, well, let's mute it back here instead, it's just that much easier, right, to move the mute around by assigning it to a clip. So if you haven't seen that video, I'd encourage you to go back and check it out, and I'll put a link in this video to it. But this is kind of the whole point for me of using instrument tracks instead of auxes. That's why all of my aux track subgroups have record buttons, and they're not auxes, they're instrument tracks. And this is why, because in those moments where I want to be able to do some automation movement in the session, I can do that here, okay? So that's why these effects are, all the green tracks are my reverb effects, and I just have some mute automation that's in there for that snare to be able to do that. Something else I'm doing, what's happening down here? So this is another automation of what? Of Filter Freak bypass. So everything, let's see, can I trace this out really quick? It looks like all of this is going to this is kind of a break section. There's filtered drums in here. So I was just using this block to control that. Now, when I'm putting this together, I opened up this session and was playing with it, and sometimes these boundaries grab. But I've run into this issue where my automation follows edit was off, and I'm not sure why, but it's actually not catching right now, which is really strange. So right now, it is on. If I turn this off and turn it back on, does that do anything? No. So somewhere along the line, these connections broke, and I don't know why. And so something happened along the way. But when I'm first, basically when I'm first making these, I'll put the mute together with the block, and then I can trim this out and decide where I want that to go and where I want that to end. And that connection broke in there at some point. Automation follows edit was off, and I don't know why, but I probably had a break in that relationship there between those two somehow. But that's just another look at how to utilize the instrument tracks for stuff like that. Okay. I had a fun time with these drums, by the way, because I guess I'll come back here. I'm not really doing anything crazy with the drum programming here. A lot of this stuff probably came from some of my own samples or battery. I like to do some battery layers, and then I'll throw in things that I've done. This is just my phone vibrating, is this track right here. And one of the things that's happening in here is I actually did some, probably some clip-based, turn the groups off here. I think I did some clip-based gain and transposing on this. So there's a fun little sly thing that's happening in there underneath the track. If you notice it, you'll notice it now, if you didn't notice it before. But I like to just layer in these little kind of treats in percussion in the track. And sometimes you wouldn't really notice the layers that are, that are happening in there, but it kind of comes together. And this is, let's see, here's my SSD crashes. So I was talking about the MIDI that I'll do for a cymbal roll like that. And this is one of those ramps, one of those velocity ramps where I can essentially select all of these and say, I want to go from 32, in this case, up to, 113. And I want to randomize that ramp all the way up. And that's just the click of a button, to make that ramp just a little bit more interesting than just a straight line velocity curve, right? It's not always up there, but it eventually climbs together, by the end of that. Pretty neat little detail in there. Okay, I didn't mean to make that active. We'll just hide that. So other than that, I don't think anything really special about this drum section here. I think it's pretty straightforward, and I'll just close up that folder there for the programmed drums. Just a couple things about basses. I like the basses to change. I feel like there's an intensity that comes in. If I start the whole methodology of this track with like electronic stuff, and then it becomes more organic, and then nothing beats the expressiveness of a real drum kit. And so I use the real drum kit to bring in the intensity on the song. Use the programmed stuff for the really, just to kind of build the track out and to have some fun with some of the modern programming of it. Release it into more of the organic acoustic stuff toward the end to get the intensity out of the track. So early bass parts, really simple sine wave there, gets a little bit more interesting here. And there's a handoff that happens here. Okay, and then we have the acoustic bass in there. At the time, I wanted to meet with a couple of bass players, and I just wasn't able to, so I did the bass line just on my own. And that was a pretty simple bass line. I used I forget what Kontakt, I used a library in Kontakt. I want to say it was a Shreddage library or something for the bass in there that I ended up settling on there for that track and printed that down. But I like to add movement in there. I could have just used one bass sound the whole time. It would have felt really monotonous to do something like that. At the front here, this is probably just a look into the fact that I really like Omnisphere and use it a lot. I like to start with patches in Omnisphere and really tweak them out or change the layering, get into some grain table stuff or whatever. I don't remember everything that I did with all of these tracks. I had a couple initial instrument tracks in here, but I get into a mode where I will have a plugin up and I will dial in and work through a patch for something, and then I will commit that down and then work through some tweaks and changes to another patch and then print that down, and then I'll take certain layers out of each one. This is the intro of the song here in the layers. Kind of a smooth glass pad that's in there. We had this vocal drop that's in here. And what I did was I took vocal parts from Kirsten and Julius, and then I vocoded Kirsten's "Bye" between these three tracks. Okay, and that's how those three tracks came together. I basically took Kirsten's "Always Standing By" and just put Julius's "Standing" in there and processed them through everything that you hear there. A little bit of panning, automation, phasing, definitely some compression, and then the vocoding keyboard run in there. I think on that vocoder I'm using Arturia, maybe. I think I'm using the Arturia vocoder on that track. Okay. So there's that. I had some fun with that. And then I forgot the fourth track down here, which is the delay off of that as well.
Standing by.
Okay, so I'm taking the delay and then applying these tracks or these effects to it, the filter freak and a little bit of phasing and EQ in there happening also. Okay. Oh, this is cool. Could I find this track? I don't know if I still have this track, but if I can find it real quick, I'd like to be able to show it to you. It might be down here somewhere. And if I can't find it quickly, I will just let it go. But you're going to miss out. I'm looking for the vocals because this is something that I did to Kirsten's voice. There's the vocoder track that I was telling you about. Let's jump to that one. And so that was Arturia, the vocoder V that I was using for that. And so let me check out these two tracks here. So I'm going to activate these and we'll see if they remained intact through the printing process. But one of the things I really like about Omnisphere is the grain table synthesis that you can do in here. I would have taken a audio file from Kirsten and dropped it in here and gone into the grain table page in here and automated this fader to turn her voice into a pad here. Okay, so one of the things that's not happening is this fader is not having an effect. So for some reason that automation got lost, but that automation was tied to this fader. So if I just play this for a minute. Oh. Okay. That was the audio processing error that I got there. But this is just Kirsten singing bye. And this is me stretching it out with Elastic Audio to make it just this long bye, and then automating, importing it in here, and then automating this granular fader essentially to work through that. So it's not demonstrating the fader moving, but that's what the automation is there. So it's this really subtle pad that's underneath there. You think it's a pad unless you listen closely and you hear all of this movement in it. And if I activate this one, it is a little bit different. I actually did a couple of these. So this is the harmony for it. Okay. So grain table synthesis in Omnisphere is a lot of fun. Really brought the intro together there for me, in just having something just a little bit more unique than just a pad sitting up under there. I have this philosophy. I talk to students about this all the time. The philosophy is, what's one more thing you can do? Just press into it a little bit more. Don't stay at step 1, or you'll never know what step 10 could have been like. And just press into things and come up with something unique. And you'll know it when you get there. And that was an example of that with those tracks there as part of the intro. So that was a fun time working through those parts. I don't have a lot to say about the guitars, except that my guitar stacks here are really a combination of production guitars and Travis playing guitar. So I would have given him, we did some mock-ups. I did some mock-ups, and then he was playing and doing a lot of overdubs on those. He added some really cool kind of filler parts in here. Solo these guitars out here. All right, I think we used Neural DSP guitar amp sims for a lot of this. I took his dry tracks because I wanted to be able to play with some different amp styles. I didn't know what I was going to want, but I wanted something that would bite a little bit on this bridge because it's a really powerful bridge. And I just wanted, it's the first time we hear the guitars at all, and they just come in and it's this biting distortion right away. And the energy just comes to life on this bridge part. It is really a lot of fun. All right, turn your speakers down if you need to, but here's a listen going into the bridge.
By to make my weaknesses your strength. You were always standing by. Unconventional, unequivocal, insurmountable. What other power can matter but this? Unpredictable.
Pretty cool. I left some of the production parts in there because they're unnaturally distorting, but they add a little bit more grit when added to Travis's parts. So here is a production guitar part, and here's Travis's part. All right, so that has a little bit more life in it. So these are just combinations of all of those going through. I have to pause here for a moment and talk about what's happening in the tempo ruler. And this is something that you have to do while you are composing and building a project out, because going back and doing it later is not going to be possible once you get audio renders in here. But this tempo ruler is a huge part of what brings the life into, into this production. One of the things that's happening here is if we listen to Julius's words here, right, he needs really time to land each word in these triplets that are happening through this rhythmic part here.
You were always standing by. Unconventional, unequivocal, insurmountable. What other power can matter but this? Unpredictable, incorruptible, indisputable. What other power can matter but this? Unconventional, unequivocal, insurmountable. What other power can matter but this? Unpredictable, incorruptible, indisputable.
If I played that all the way through at one tempo, it would completely lose the energy that it has from doing tempo ramps in here. Made all the difference in the world. And it leaves all the time necessary to land each of those words in there. What other power but this, right? So it really elongates that line there to draw, attention to it. And so I decided that early on I was really struggling with landing these parts in the bridges, and I was like, it needs to slow down here just a little bit. And it took me a lot of time to dial in, this ramp. And then from there, it's just copy and paste, paste, to work through that section. But it totally changes the entire feel of the song to do that. And you have to do that before you print anything down, because all of your MIDI production is tied to that tempo work. So all of the drums here, while we're working through that, I'm quantizing the drums, but then I'm going back in and I have the drum parts in there, and then I'm just slowing it down in certain ways and trying to figure out how that tempo needs to work.
You were always standing by. Unconventional, unequivocal, insurmountable. What other power can matter but this? Unpredictable.
Right? And because of those tempo ramps, it sounds real. It sounds like a real drummer. Technically it is, right? But it brings the believability and the authenticity into it when you put tempo ramps into things. It makes a huge difference. So I try to incorporate that into, if I'm going into a live drum part or something at some point, I've really tried to incorporate some of that tempo stuff in there. I also did it on Alive and Well. There's a lot of tempo action in there, and I'll do another video about that session as well. But changes everything here for the guitars, especially, and the drums, you know, in this part of the session. So the main instruments here, I think everything is really pretty straightforward. I have a couple different keys patches in here, just depending on what part of the song we're in. Right, so we're at the verse here.
Lead well.
I need something to cut through the mix a little bit more there on the verses. So different keys patches just based on where we are in the song. I really like doing background layers like this. I like subtle layers to build things up with. So here's a DX7 pad from Arturia. It's kind of this interesting, like eerie, like this sounds like it's from Dune or something, doesn't it? But it's just going through those keys with a long release time, like short, the slow attack times, long release times, just so those notes are bleeding over each other. And we have this kind of like organ pad that's on top of it. But really subtle, but just providing the chord progression in a different way than just having a chord progression.
You raise up partners and break new ground. And you...
So there's movement and we're in the key, but what is that movement coming from? It's kind of hard to pick out, but it's just the bed, right? And the bed is in there, just giving some life there. We have this sidechained clip that's coming in here, and I'm looking to see if I have the original instrument for this one. I probably do somewhere, but I don't see it, and it might just be something that I printed and just moved on. There is a plugin that I use once in a while from Air. I think it's called, I want to say it's called the Pumper. So the Air Pumper is essentially an LFO sidechaining plugin is really what it is. Just like if you were sidechaining a compressor, that's what the Air Pumper plugin does, and it just gives you a couple different looks at shapes and curves and things that you can do. So it's not really any more complicated than that. It doesn't have to be, but that's the plugin that I'll use in here for that kind of stuff, and there's a number of different companies that do that. But this is a really nice subtle movement under this track. Otherwise, it would be a little bit empty, and there's something under there, but you can't quite put your finger on it. But it's a neat way to fill in the chord progression again.
I don't lead well. Your people are hunted. I hide, ashamed. But you...
There's a high pad here, horn pad in here.
Cover our knees and take them down. You're always standing by.
Voices. Kind of a lower bed pad in there. Soft E piano. This is great. What did I put in here? Here is just underlaying traffic noise. So this is me just recording traffic with my field recorder. I have a lot of recordings that I've done with my field recorder over the years. And I just dropped it in here and put a low pass filter on it. So there's just some moving noise under there, right? And it's, but you put all of this stuff together in a bed. So if I just leave these two in here, I almost could have just done these three. I mean, this is the struggle that I have sometimes where I'm like, what can I could take this out, I could take this out, I could leave this in. I probably had 10 tracks of layers in here and I just settled on these, you know, to mix those in for that part. But all of those layers come together, you know, eventually there in the end. And it breaks out into kind of another repeat of the same thing, but they're just different tracks. Is this reverent section that's in here? Droning bass in here. I misspoke. I was thinking I was at a different part there. But I'm just layering up several. This could have just been a string patch, but I think it's more interesting if I put it together in some different layers in here. So these are like synth orchestra parts almost. And this is a really good, actually, study in probably in multiband compression. Am I using a multiband compressor in here? Sometimes I do that. I'm probably just doing it through the dynamic EQ here. But these tracks are really rich. And so sometimes it just comes down to, I'm just going to open up one of these here for a minute. I want to see what my EQs are. All right, I'll look at the other two then. Because sometimes if they're really rich patches, you just have to cut a lot of the low end out of them. And I'm wondering how far I went with a couple of these. So actually not too harsh on them. So I thought I might have been a little bit more aggressive about them, but not so much there. Okay. A little arpeggiator in here.
Sleep well. Your people have a sentence. My risk.
Okay, it's just some little glistening fun stuff in there. So here's the pad section that's coming in with the guitars. This section at the break is all guitars and just big kind of synth pad sound. This is really tricky to balance because I wanted the pads to be out there. You know, if you're thinking like a live concert, you just want those like Juno pads to rip through everything. And the guitars, obviously, but I had to err on the side of the guitars so that that bite and that grit cuts through a little bit more than the pads do.
Unconventional, unequivocal. Indisputable, what other power can matter but this? Unconventional, unequivocal.
All right, so the pad layers in there, it's not just the guitars, right? These have to be here. If I take these out, let's just do that. Where's my, all right, there's my sub there.
Standing by. Unconventional, unequivocal, insurmountable. What other power can matter but this?
And it's really this high horn, this saw pad right here, just decaying through that just gives you, there's something else under there.
Insurmountable. What other power can matter?
Right, that 1/2 second right there is so important, just to keep that that intensity up through a pad, a saw pad that's in there underneath. Just makes all the difference on a layer like that. So we come down here to the orchestra parts, and again, I talked about this earlier. I didn't really do anything crazy with the orchestra parts. They're just in here for kind of bedding in the back. And don't tell anybody, but I think I missed a note in here. I think I have a note off message that accidentally cut off a note that's right there. It's in the song. Oh, well, I don't think anyone will actually notice it because there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on there, but I actually have a MIDI faux pas in there. I will say these French horns are big because they're actually harmonizing the melody, but they are really the only part that's really cutting through the song here. And I'm going to unsolo so we can hear that a little bit.
Incorruptible, indisputable.
So we've got the harmony there over the melody. The thing about horns is I love horns, and I really would just push that horn out there over that break, but I can't because I don't want to lose the message. And you have to make these really hard decisions sometimes. Like, I really want this orchestra to come in like slamming, but this isn't an open concert hall where you can just fill the room with sound. You have limits. And the challenge to mixing in balance is knowing what has to stay down, so that this is where the choir is coming in too. So I need the choir to stay on top, and I can't have the horns and the strings and the guitars and the pads and the choir, fighting, because they're all the same frequencies, and something has to sit back a little bit. But the horns are still noticeable there because they're harmonizing. And so that's the part that slips through a little bit there on the brightness with those parts. So it's fun, and I really like the orchestra and the horn stuff, but it has to sit back sometimes, right? So these are the effects tracks, what I'm doing with the transitions in the song. Let's listen to a couple of these here.
Honor and make us proud.
This really cool sub arpeggiator in there. Right, it's subtle, and it's just a different way to do it. You could put a bass note under there, it wouldn't be the same, just adding a little bit of movement with it at the same time.
And you restore honor and make us proud.
Okay, and I do a lot of these kind of ramps on bar transitions where we're going into this break before verse 2 here. So here's the first layer. And there's this one. And this is carrying us through the break. Distant organ, whatever I did to that to render that down. Chime glide. Right, but it's a layer of a whole bunch of pieces here.
Make us proud.
All right, there's one transition. This is going into the chorus now. So on a track like that, I'm probably often using the Eventide Black Hole plugin to automate a reverb ramp in there and to just sustain and freeze that reverb indefinitely. So at some point, probably when I render this clip out, I would have to do it by selection. Sometimes if I don't, it'll render out a reverb tail that's like an hour long. And I'll be like, oops. And I'll usually undo that and redo it again, so I don't just have like a 1 hour file in there. But I'll trim this back and then fade it out at the appropriate time. So this is where you really just have to use your audio editing to work with, your composition to make things fit the way that they should.
You're always standing by in my distress. You're always standing by. Hear my.
Okay, just a really soft fade out there. This is a really fun clip that I have in here for this transition.
I don't sleep well. Your people have a sentence.
So we have a break there. Your people have a sentence, right? So the, in this story, particularly, with Esther, there's a law on the books now about hanging Jewish people. And so there's a suspension to this that's really a big deal. And so this ramp up in here is this kind of like almost this like thriller kind of component to it.
Your people have a sentence.
But totally makes the whole verse, you know, to drop the beat out and to have that in there just to build the you know, the suspension behind it. What else is happening down here? We're coming into the bridge. So these are basically the effects ramps that are setting off the bridge here. Okay, so I had some fun with an effect on that. So the mod delay in here is, what did I do? Because one side is going a lot longer on that. And I don't know if it's... Okay. I'm not doing anything crazy with panning there. Okay. Did I cut the... where am I? Right, left? Oh, okay. I'm like tripping myself out here because so in here I have one side there's no delay, and I just brought the other side up a little bit. And so it's... The reason I did that is because the delay is happening off to the side as the vocals are coming in here was kind of the point of that. Is it something we really notice that much?
Unconventional.
Not really. There's too much going on in there, but the idea was cool. It's fading in, and then let's let it decay off to the side while everything else is coming up in the middle here. And I think these layers, I think these little subtle layers matter in the big scheme of things because there's just energy and there are things that are happening, whether you really pick up on it or not. Right?
Unconventional.
Just a little bit of energy in those parts. Other than that, we come down towards the end of the song here, and we're breaking out of that final key change area and settling down here again.
Always standing
By.
by.
Now this is called intro bass end, and I think it's because I used the same bass pad at the front of the song too. So this is actually functioning, I just lost my place. This is actually functioning like a bookend, this bass part here. And I like that it comes in and then it slopes up. Okay, pretty cool. I like just adding movement and just trying to bring in things that we haven't heard yet. I think it keeps the energy of the project moving forward. So I had some fun in here with vocal effects. If I go down and just kind of take a look at our voices here a little bit. Fun fact about my voice. Last year, I had a rough year physically throughout the summer when we were trying to finish this project. At some point earlier in the year, I did a scratch track for my verse, and I ended up towards the end of the year just leaving it in there and just saying like, this is what it's going to be, and just produced it out and tuned it and everything as best as I could. It's a little thinner. I think it's not quite as rich as the other vocals are, but it's the best I could do kind of in those circumstances at the time. And I just thought, this is what it is. It's just part of the journey. It's just part of the walk, and I'm just going to leave it in there for that part of it. And for Julius down here, we had, let's see, we have a couple effects that we have in here on him.
My hand and win the day.
So this is just me singing Day behind Julius here, and then just rendering that out with a lot of reverb, just something to carry that out in there.
Standing by to but you don't sweat the numbers. You raise up far.
We had some fun with the choruses here on his voice.
In my distress, you were always standing by. Hear my.
That's this reverb here. So this is a send that is being automated. Let's just show that here. This long verb effects right here. This is being automated to unmute there. We'll just see that automation lane.
You were always standing by. Hear my request.
And that's the reverb there, just using a revibe effect there. Kind of a dulled down, just a nice dulled down reverb tail. That's just decaying through there, right? It just keeps us kind of invested on what's about to happen. I think at this part of the song, the music drops out. You're like, we're into verse 2 or chorus 2, and the music drops out. Like, what's happening right now? So it's actually our first chorus in the song, but after verse 2. And I think at this stage, you're kind of prepared to just hear changes, and you're expecting something unique and interesting to happen. You don't know what it's going to be yet. And so I think with Kirsten, I have her kind of doubling up Julius's parts in here a little bit.
Unconventional, unequivocal, insurmountable. What other power can matter but this? Unpredictable, incorruptible, indisputable. What other power can matter but this?
Right? Having her go up there at the end just keeps the song moving forward, right? It keeps changes happening.
Oh, what other power can matter but this?
And I'll just say a word about the effect that I'm using on his voice here. I'm trying to essentially push his voice out and almost like an announcement, like a town square kind of announcement kind of reverb.
Unconventional.
So there's like this decaying early reflection that's happening where you kind of hear that hang and then it kind of dies. So the early reflections are there and it feels like more of like a bunch of short echoes there.
Unconventional, unequivocal.
So it just sounds like we're there are buildings, and the image I was trying to put in my mind was we're in a town square and there are buildings where this is kind of reflecting back a little bit, like it's this kind of town square announcement is the energy that I wanted to have behind that, this proclamation that just, and the reverb has to be there. If I put this in there and I don't have that specific reverb on,
unconventional, unequivocal, insurmountable. What other power can matter but this? Unpredictable.
but it's not this one. It is, let's see, announce is going, I lost that reverb. It's down here. Okay, so here is the reverb. A large space. So this is a stadium preset, and I pulled the high pass filter or the low pass filter down a little bit here, the high shelf down a little bit, and this is the effect on that. So this reverb just got it just got bumped down over time. There's actually nothing else going to this, but this is the one that's happening there. So if I mute this one now, let's just mute all the effects here.
Unconventional, unequivocal, insurmountable. What other power can matter but this? Unpredictable.
Right? So you think effects matter? Here we go.
Unconventional, unequivocal, insurmountable. What other power can matter but this? Unpredictable, incorruptible.
Right, those moments when the music drops out and you hear the reverb reflection, happening, it just sounds big all on its own, and that is just a huge point of emphasis working through a section like that. It's really cool. There's a lot I could say here, I think, about the vocal parts and recording the choir parts here. I just think one of the things I could say as I'm kind of coming toward the end here is that this is why, I might do one song a year instead of 10 songs in 6 months. It's for me, it's a journey, and I have to follow the inspiration all the way through and feel like I'm investing the time necessary in each part, that there's a complete story there, telling it as much as possible through, the skill set that I have. And sometimes I'll go back and listen to things and think I missed that. I wish that could have been a little different or whatever. But that's just part of the journey, and why things take so long is all these little details here that are, that are happening in here. Our vocal tracking sessions were a lot of fun, and I think what I'll do here is I'll just show like the choir builds that we were doing here. So here's this is 5-6 tracks of me doing the tenor parts in here, 6 tracks of me doing basses, 4 tracks of Julius doing tenors. We did 4 tracks of Kirsten doing altos. Brooke came in and did altos and then did sopranos. And so, if I go down to the key change here,
Try to make my weakness your strength. You are always standing by in my distress. Always standing by.
so that high soprano part really takes the cake here on these key changes, and that's all Brooke Twiddell, and she killed that right there. A fun fact about me recording my bass lines, the bass parts in here. I did this on the day that I recorded Brooke. So Brooke came in, we had the mic set up, and we recorded her doing all of these parts, talking through all of that, what the parts were going to be, layering things in, punching in, doing all that kind of stuff. And then she left. And then I thought, it needs to change, and I need this part to drop down, because it wasn't doing that initially. It was just doing the regular chorus, and I knew that the bass needed to drop down because the soprano is going up, and I wanted this, this dimension to happen in the chord progression there. So I pulled the mic back up and set it up and recorded these parts, and I thought, why am I turning my mic preamp up so loud? Oh well, I don't even care right now. I was trying to manage so many things that day. And I recorded all of these tracks with the mic capsule pointed the wrong way. So it was a Rode K2, and I was just in a hurry, and so I just pulled it up and set it up. And the only way on the road is there's a little gold dot right on the front, and I just wasn't paying attention. And my headphones were kind of half on. I was just listening to the click, and I just sang my lines. And then I came back, and they were really bassy and phasey sounding. And I just listened to it, and I was like, okay, there's more low end rumble in there. I'm just going to leave it in there. So I actually recorded this drop on the when I did that, the capsule was out of phase. It was pointed the wrong direction. So your sound is going around the capsule and it's picking that up. So it's picking up the low frequency energy and very little actual articulation in there. And it's this weird phasing that's happening on my bass voice just for that line. All right, and then I mixed it in there and sweetened it in there a little bit more, as much as I could, but I just had more fun, I think, producing that in there than actually going back and re-recording it. I just didn't feel like doing it. So, all right, so all these layers, though, it's eventually just printed all of these down to those subs there, and we're at the end. This is another reason why I use instrument tracks, is because I found it useful for this. I haven't always done it this way, but I did it in one other project before, and it was really handy here. I set a default volume position. So here is my audio volume fader, right? And I think this must have been around -3 or something. So I have this here, and then I'm kind of practicing, because the choir isn't even happening yet, I think, at this point. And I can just hide all these back again. Shut all that down. Yep, okay. Did I hide too much? Looks like I did. I didn't mean to hide these guys. There we go. So this is me practicing with the mutes a little bit. Or just level. So what I was doing is just bringing up the level on these interior parts a little bit. And it was easier for me to say, I need to take this. This is like a 1 dB boost from -3. So I forget what this was at right here. What is this? This is -5, -4. So whatever happened here, I actually retrimmed these because I see -2 dB or up 2 dB actually is what that says. And so I went from -5.6 to -4.2. So I changed that by half a dB at some point. And then I just said, I want this line from the choir to be louder. So if I'm watching the fader here, I have the fader in trim mode. I eventually pulled it up after these adjustments. And it's just not reflecting that because I'm in trim. So this is adding 3 dB after whatever automation is occurring in the background here. So I'm not going to see the fader move there. But the point is that I am using these blocks to move that around. So if I wanted this particular line to be that much louder, I just option drag that clip down, and now that's 1.5 dB higher. So I'm using the instrument track clip to pull the automation change where I want it to be, and then I'm able to boost up certain lines, you know, just up in there. And I just did that a couple times, didn't I? We did it down here in the break too. Right? Just clever. Just a clever way to do that. Bump this up where the choir is coming in, the other instruments have dropped out a little bit, and just bump them up. Just drag the clip over. There it is. And it's just a quick way to do that automation adjustment rather than doing it in individual breakpoints. Everything drops back down just a hair again when all those instruments and the piano and everything come back in as well. So.
Always standing by.
Okay, all those little details matter. It's all about finding the easiest way to work around them. Okay, I'll go ahead and show you my mix master chain here. Everything is going through this mix aux here. The master is doing nothing. There's no processing on the master at all. We don't really need master faders in modern production anymore, technically, because we don't really have to dither down a whole lot, which is the whole point of a master fader. On a master fader in Pro Tools, your processing is after the fader. So the whole point there is that the volume would eventually slope down and you would have dither applying or maintaining, if you will, just a very quiet, transparent as much as possible, a noise floor for really smooth volume fade outs to happen into. And with modern production a lot, we don't dither down to another bit depth because we release things at 24-bit. If you're distributing something and sending it out, a lot of times you're submitting a 24-bit mix and then Apple, Spotify, whoever are applying their codec and their mix down or their bit rate drop essentially to it in the background applying those things. CD Baby is different. CD Baby does a 16-bit distribution, and that's what I used for this song. So if I open Ozone in here, let's see. I have interesting. Do I not have any? I do have dither. Oh, here it is. Okay. I was looking. I don't know why I'm looking for a module in here. Dither is its own page over here. So I do have an active low dither amount happening for 16-bit here because that was the master that went to CD Baby, for example. But at this stage, I'm not really looking to make a whole lot of adjustments here. And this is the Ozone EQ. So this is 2 dB. So this is a dB boost. It's some low end here. One thing I will say about mixing for me is that I have some Bear Dynamic headphones, and I think the high frequency content is pretty tricky to gauge going back and forth between speakers and headphones. I had a challenge with that. So I feel like the song overall is probably slightly dull, and it probably could be brightened up a little bit. And that's just the nature of my monitoring environment, just doing the best I can. I do monitor through Sound ID reference. So I have the Sound ID reference plugin. It's inactive right now. Could go ahead and turn that on just for you to see what I'm talking about. So I have my 1770 Pros, and this is the counter curve, for those. And that's the idea. So I do mix through that, and then I'll take them off, and I check things through Apple earbuds. Not Apple earbuds. I have Beats earbuds that I'll listen to my tracks through as well, through different speakers that I can. I think in the long run, the track is a bit dull, and it could be brightened up probably a little bit. I'm just using Insight for the metering there. And tonal balance control, I just use this just to get an idea on, the frequency feedback and stuff over time. So those are just my measurement tools, and Ozone 9 is essentially my mastering tool there. A little bit of let me see what I'm doing with dynamics here.
You were always standing by.
So all I'm doing with the dynamics module is just controlling the low end a little bit and making sure that doesn't become overwhelming, I think is all I'm doing there. Vintage compressor, really low ratio here just to tie this together a little bit.
You were always standing by.
Unconventional.
Yeah, it's not like we're actually hearing the difference because I'm not turning it on or off. I don't think we would notice that much of a difference anyway if I did turn it off. And at this level, at the maximizer, I'm looking for, I have to be careful when I'm mastering these songs, right? I'm sure you're probably looking at my limiter and saying, wow, you have a whole lot of headroom there. Actually, I don't. So at the quiet parts of this song, there is a lot that's left in there, right? But the louder parts are very powerful, and they're very loud, and you have to leave room for that. So the integrated loudness of this song is about -11. And that might surprise some people looking at this limiter, but that's what the integrated loudness of the song is. It's around -11. So I could go harder, but it would not serve the song because the hard parts would be too compressed and they'd be distorting. And I don't want to do that. I usually set a ceiling of -1. Some mastering engineers that I follow talk a lot about that and about how the codecs will actually take a little bit of that headroom away and actually add a little bit of gain to it as well. So that's just a default that I do. I don't have a go-to limiting algorithm in here. I test a couple out, see if I even notice much. In this scenario, I'm not noticing much. I'm really just checking my integrated loudness and trying to bump things a little bit. I'll push them a little bit and then I'll back this off. I've had this threshold down to probably -3 at times and then kind of worked my way back up until things sounded clean to me again. And this is where I settled. So, just training myself to listen for those things, not to settle for distortion, and just to let the song be what it needs to be. But the integrated loudness is higher than you might think, just looking at the maximizer on this. Okay. Thank you for watching. I certainly on a song like this, I start in one place and it's a journey for me, and I only follow my inspiration anymore. I don't try to follow every musical idea that I have. I know that the song is real and the inspiration is real if it keeps drawing me in and I keep walking out this process. So this is Always Standing By. Thank you for watching. Go create something.